everyone. I want to introduce you to our shepherd Abraham.
Hi.
And our small flock of sheepies. Hello, sheepies. Now, the picture of shepherd and sheep is, of course, extremely biblical. All over the Hebrew Bible, God is using this picture to talk about his relationship with his people, right? Probably the most famous example is Psalm 23, the Lord is my... It's in that context, once again, that Jesus shows up and starts reusing these images, this time to talk about himself. He's famously quoted as saying, I am the good. Now, if we grew up going to church and reading our New Testament, this sounds pretty normal to us. Well, of course Jesus is my good shepherd, and we even have a warm fuzzy or something like this. But I don't know if you use that idiom in UK. Okay, you do. Okay, great. But for a Jewish audience, this sounds kind of like blasphemy! Remember, when Jesus says this, there is no New Testament. There are no Christians from the UK. Right? Jesus hasn't been crucified yet. And he is using language that exclusively referred to God. What is this man trying to say? He's God or something? Let us remember the context in which these things are said. Very important. And so when Jesus is using this imagery, it is very edgy. Okay? But it's crucially important, right? We're looking back through the testimony, the disciples who wrote the New Testament for us, it becomes very clear. Jesus was not just a man. He was a real man, right? He cries, he eats, he sleeps, he gets tired, but he's also fully God. This is critically important, right? Because this helps to explain how he could live a truly human life and yet be without sin. Therefore, his death on that cross can be payment or atonement for our sins. Otherwise, Jesus would have been just another martyr. Thank God, Jesus is also God. And these images are all over his teaching. Especially John chapter 10 is full of these images. I'm the door to the sheepfold. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out except through me. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. They hear my voice, and they follow after me. Thank you, Abraham. Please follow me. What we've got over here is a replica of a tomb or a grave, replete with its round stone door and the track that it moves on. There's a burial cave inside with holes or niches in the walls where the bodies would be laid. This is the standard Second Temple period tomb. The burial Jesus receives, in case we didn't know, the disciples tell us literally in their Gospels, this was the manner of the burial of the Jews. And clearly it's a rich man's burial. If you think about buying the land and having the rock cut, wow, that's expensive. Poor people are simply buried into a hole in the ground. And it tells us that Joseph of Arimathea was a rich man. It was his own family tomb that he uses to bury Jesus in. No biggie, Jesus just had to borrow the tomb for the weekend. It tells us specifically that Joseph buys the linen sheet also to wrap the body of Jesus in. This is also not a cheap item. And Nicodemus shows up. He brings a large amount of myrrh and aloes. These are very expensive, fragrant spices. They wrap this in with the grave clothes, put the body inside, and they close the door. So, Jesus is buried by two rich guys like a rich man in a rich man's tomb, even though Jesus himself was poor, financially speaking. He became poor so that we could become rich, not primarily financially speaking. This is really important. Another prophecy is fulfilled. Isaiah 53 verse 9 says, he will be with the rich in his death. And so it is fulfilled. Questions? Isaiah 53 verse 9.
What size would the original stone be?
This is an average size of the ones we have found. One of the Gospels says megale in the Greek, which means very large. However, I point out to you, it couldn't have been a whole lot larger than this. Even this, if it falls on you, break a limb, and you couldn't get off of you. Okay, I would be afraid to move this without another man to help me. If it's much bigger than this, you need more than 2 guys. But the Gospels are very clear. The maximum that there were Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. And they weren't young men anymore. They were both in the Sanhedrin. They were in their 50s. This doesn't mean that they were weak, just that they weren't like, in their prime in terms of their physical prime, right?
What's the stick?
They were in their soul or spiritual prime. That's why they were in the Sanhedrin, yeah?
Stick.
Stick is to make sure it doesn't fall on anybody.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's just the safety measure we've taken.
I'm going in.
You may go in. There are no dead bones in there, so there's nothing to worry about. But it's made from real stone. Please don't hit your head. I promise it'll hurt if you do. It's easy to do so, especially when you come out. Please, please don't hit your head.
How many can go in at once?
Actually, the whole group can fit in there. I fit like 40-some young people in there once.
Shut the door.
And some of us out before.
Oh, sorry, yeah, come out, yeah. Oh, sorry.
It says that there was a seal. Now, some people get this idea that they took a bunch of mortars and they actually physically sealed the tomb. I think this is somewhat amazing. A seal was probably an official seal. Maybe it had some kind of wax seal, and there was an official guard there.
Oh, yeah. That's why they're buried, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Is that where the bodies will be laid?
I suppose so.
Wow, the old body. What's your year?
Nazareth.
Not bad.